That's the second thing that is answered on the cross. See, we receive our sense of our own value according to how we think we are perceived or how other people tend to perceive or treat us, from people that we believe have the right to declare our value. The most obvious one is parents and children, right? Parents who tell a kid, you're worthless, you're no good. Well, the kid's going to believe them. Why? Because the parent is the person they look at to affirm their value. Siblings, friends, teachers, mentors, people who we admire, people that we want to be like, people who we love, ourself, oftentimes can give us a message that tells us this is who you are, this is your value, this is your worth. And so often that message is you're worthless. So the real question is, how do we know for sure what our value is and if we actually have worth? Well, if you're going to look to someone who has the most opportunity, the most right to be able to speak into your life to tell you whether or not you have value, whether or not you're worthless. Who better than God who created you to tell you of your worth and value? In Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, it says that whenever he created him, it said, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. Every human being who has ever lived and ever will live is created in the image of God. There's some connection that we have to the divinity of God, that we are special in his eyes. So much so that in Genesis chapter 9, verse 6, whenever after the flood, he tells Noah, if someone sheds man's blood, then their blood is to be shed. He instituted capital punishment. Now, however you feel about capital punishment, the fact is that God so values you that he says, this is a deal breaker. You murder someone because they're in my image, it's over. Do you know that in the Old Testament, kidnapping is also a capital offense? Whether you're the one who actually takes someone, let's say, slavery, they kidnap someone, sell them into forced labor, whether you're the kidnapper or the one who's found in possession, both get to be executed. God hates oppression. God hates exploitation. God hates to see people mistreated. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 6, verse 16 and 19 actually says, these 6 things the Lord hates, yes, 7, which are an abomination to him. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren. Every single one of those things that God points out and says, I hate that behavior, is a mistreatment, an exploitation, an abuse of other people. And God says, no, you are so valuable to me. I hate to see you mistreated. Even in your sin and rebelliousness and wickedness and selfishness and pride, God still looks upon you and says, I value you. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. It's a verse we all know, and many of you have probably also heard, hey, here's a good way to actually know whether or not you are worthless and whether or not you are valued. Right there where it says that God so loved the world, take out the world, put your name in there. For God so loved you that he gave his only begotten Son, so that if you believe in him, you will not perish but have everlasting life. And in what is my personal favorite passage in Romans chapter 5, starting in verse 8, it says that God demonstrates his own love. Now, I'm going to reword this a little bit, so I'm talking to you. That God demonstrates his own love towards you in that while you were still a sinner, Christ died for you. Much more then, having now been justified by his blood, you shall be saved from wrath through him. For if when you were an enemy of God, for if you, an enemy, you were reconciled to God through the death of his Son, much more, having been reconciled, you shall be saved by his life. That's God's message of your value. And further along in Romans chapter 8, starting in verse 31, it says, "What then shall we say about these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not with him also freely give us all things? Who shall bring a charge against you, against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is he who condemns? It is Christ who died and furthermore is also risen, who is even at the right hand of God, who also makes intercession for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulations or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword?" Who actually has the authority to condemn you and tell you that you're worthless and of no value? The only person who has that authority is God himself, and he has spoken, and he said, no. You have value. You have worth. No one else can even bring a charge against you to say otherwise. What kind of arrogant, narcissistic, egomaniac has the audacity to say, "I don't care what God says, I say you're worthless"? Well, who cares what they say? If God says that you are valuable, then you matter to him. Nothing else matters. No one else's opinion is even worth consideration because God has spoken. And no amount of sin can change that fact about you. There's no one that you have hurt, betrayed, mistreated in your life more than God. Amen? Every sin you commit, it may be against someone else, but in doing that, you're also sinning against God. And the sovereign, holy, righteous, all-powerful creator of all things looks down upon you with your sin and your faults and your failings and your pride and your selfishness and your disobedience and your betrayal and your idolatry. And he says, I want that person in my family. That's how much I love them. That's how much I value them, that I will send my son to pay the price that they can be in our family.
Every time I feel the walls closing, you cover me and breathe life in me again. Lord, though I feel the darkness come, I will not fear, you've ransomed me with blood.